So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Justin Reich. Justin is an associate professor of digital media and comparative media studies and writing department at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. He's the director of the Teaching Systems Lab. He is the author of Iterate, the Secret of Innovation in Schools and Failure to Design, Why Schools Alone Can't Transform Education, and the host of the Tech Lab podcast. He earned a doctorate from Harvard University, Harvard Graduate School of Education, and is the Richard Menschel Harvard Research Fellow. He is the past fellow at Beckman Klein Center for Internet and Society. His writings have been published in Science, Proceeds of the National Academy of Science, Washington Post, The Atlantic, and other scholarly journals and public venues. He started his career as a high school history teacher and a coach of wrestling and outdoor adventure activities. You can also follow Justin on social media, Twitter, and Google Scholars. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Justin Reich.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having me here. You know, I was looking at the podium and the theme this morning of leading with why, and I think one way to think of it is leading with why, but another way to think of it is leading with why. Like you're on a Zoom call at night and you come upstairs and like your toddler is covered in cornstarch, half naked, rolling around on the kitchen floor. Why? About a year ago, Silicon Valley invented this machine that can do all of your students' homework for them. Why? So today we'll be leading with why and talking about generative AI in education. It is important. I am an MIT professor, but I did start my career as a high school history teacher. So while there might be a little bit of math, you can promise that it won't be too much that we'll deal with why. So why do we care about AI in schools? Here are at least 4 reasons that we'll try to touch on a little bit today. The number one is that when new technologies come along, they transform the working world, they transform the way that we engage with each other as citizens, and schools need to be responsive to those changes. The ways that white-collar workers do their work moving forward with a machine that can generate a bunch of human-sounding plausible text is going to change. There are going to be enormous changes in some sectors. Software engineering is going to transform incredibly rapidly. There'll be slower changes in other places. But we as educators should be watching these changes and think about how they're affecting our schools. It may be the case that some of these tools are particularly helpful for educators in doing their work. These things are all new, and we don't know that yet. You are going to have all kinds of folks who are going to come to you with business plans and services and products, and they're going to tell you that these tools are going to immediately, completely transform the way that you do teaching and learning, and they're probably not telling you the truth. But one way to be able to sort that out is to try to understand a little bit about, like, fundamentally how these tools work. Generative AI is amazing as a technology because nobody understands how it works. The very best computer scientists in the world can't quite figure out why, when we do what we do, which I'll explain a little bit operationally, it generates plausible sounding human text. But it's easily demystified, even by a former high school history teacher. You may have been told that generative AI, text-based generative AI is going to save you some time. And you might think to yourself, like, oh, you know, like, I'm a superintendent, I send a lot of communications, it might be nice if I could just go to ChatGPT and ask it to write me an email. Well, every crank in town also has access to ChatGPT, and they're just going to, please write my superintendent a complaint about how mixing Wi-Fi with artificial turf in the basement is poisoning my children's bloodstream. And you are going to be flooded with these messages. The information ecosystem that all of us are about to navigate is going to be completely flooded by low quality, medium quality text, video, images to all kinds of benign and nefarious ends. And it's going to be much, much harder to find shared factual basis in this world. And that is a challenge that we all need to learn how to navigate. And then finally, the students are cheating like crazy. Every assignment that you are giving out, that your teachers are giving out, kids are turning to ChatGPT to do. I just got this message from a teacher. They sent their kids home and they said, do some finger painting tonight and bring it in. And they saw posted to Seesaw, kids had just asked DALL-E to generate some finger paints, and that's what they submitted. That's a lie, what I just said, but it is pretty funny to ask GPT or DALL-E to generate fake images of children's finger painting and taking pictures of them. You can tell if you look closely that it's a DALL-E image. You look on the right and like the fingers are not quite right. In the bottom right there's sort of a Mickey Mouse hand. There's kind of a thumb that's popping up in between the fingers. On the left there's like some extra hands and fingers in there that don't make a whole lot of sense kind of in terms of physics. But if kids were cheating on their finger painting assignments, this is what it might look like. But there are many, many students who are adopting these tools to do their work in all kinds of ways that are basically impossible to detect. And so you and your faculty are going to have to figure out how to deal with that. And that's a lot of what we'll talk about today. It's pretty, how many of you, raise your hand if you have played around with ChatGPT or DALL-E? Okay, you all should. You all should. Maybe a kind of fifth why is just these things are fun. They're fun to play around with. You can ask GPT to write you a short play about a really heartwarming school board meeting that was hosted by the Muppets, and it'll do it for you. And they're not bad, and they're kind of fun to read. The easiest way right now to get free access to the sort of like latest text and image generation tools is actually to Bing.com. None of you have ever been to Bing.com. I don't know. You bought a Windows computer and like they made you go to it once, and you're like, please no. But actually, go to Bing.com and you push a little button that says chat, and it will take you to a freely available GPT interface. And if you sign in, then you can also use it to generate images. If you put it in creative mode, the thing in the bottom left there, that will get you to GPT-4, which is the latest release of the chat. You can do this while I'm talking. My students are just on the phone all the time while I'm lecturing. It won't be any different for me. And I actually am serious about it. That's totally fine while I'm talking to play around with some of these things. The other way that people tend to access these tools is through OpenAI, which costs $20 a month to get the premium subscription. But those are two entry points for playing around with these things. And really the easiest one is the Bing one. So feel free to log into that and to play around. Okay, let's do a little activating prior knowledge. Turn to the person next to you, or talk with a couple of people. Say as many words as you can about how GPT works. What is it doing? What is it drawing on? What is it processing? So if you asked it to make a play about a happy school board meeting that was conducted by the Muppets, what would be happening there? Talk with the people around you for about 2 minutes. Ready, go. Hi, thank you. I'll take one of these. back. Come on back. Come on back. See, if you were in my class, I would just cold call one of you. I would just point someone out and make them stand up and say what they're supposed to understand. But I won't do that here. All right, come on back. Come on back to me. That's it. People like to chat. It's good. Stop learning. Stop learning. Whatever learning you're doing right now, you got to cut it out. Okay, how many of you, by a show of hands, how many of you heard in your conversations words like think or reason or find or imagine? How many of you heard words like that? Raise your hand. Okay, good. A really important thing about computers and GPT is they don't think, they don't reason, they don't imagine, they're not people. How many of you in your conversations used the word predict or a synonym for predict? Raise your hands. If you want to kind of get what's going on with ChatGPT, the most important word that you're going to hear me say in the next few minutes is predict. What text generative AI does is, given a sequence of words, it predicts what the next word would be. Given a sequence of words, it predicts what the next word would be. Predicting, okay, so large language models, of which GPT is one, and there are a bunch of others of them out there, they're built in kind of 3 steps. The first of all is we gather as much text as we can possibly find. These companies, they go on the internet and they're like, let's grab all of Wikipedia. So that seems like a good idea. Like a lot of smart people, Wikipedia seems to work pretty well. They go to Stack Overflow, where computer programmers ask other software engineers to ask questions about coding. Okay, that seems like a good idea. They grab books. They seem to have put in some of these models 170,000 books. Some clever person went and asked GPT to start sort of spitting out ISBN numbers, because when people in-filed all the books, they kept the title page on there which has the ISBN number, and so then people could kind of figure out, which books have been shoved into these things. We don't know exactly what's in these models because they're developed by private companies who have no reason to tell us, and that's not a good thing for civil society. Now, that's a pretty good amount of text to start with, but one of the things that we've discovered is that at least in the last 3 generations of these tools, the more text you shove into them, the better they perform. And so people go to the companies, they go to Reddit. Like forums written by people sitting in their basements talking about crazy stuff. They just grab all that stuff and they put it into ChatGPT. They go to 4chans where people are just having racist conversations with each other. They grab all that stuff. They put it in GPT. All the text that you can find on the internet, as much as they can possibly hoover up, written by people who are human like us, who are biased like us, who are prejudiced like us, who are crazy like us. All of that, there's no screening for it. It just all gets shoved into the model. So a whole bunch of text. Then what it does is the systems analyze text, and they are particularly interested as one measure. There are lots of measures, but what words sort of appear next to other words. If words appear next to other words, then if you see that sequence of words again in the future, you'd be like, oh, that might be a good word to put there next. And then there's a sort of post-evaluation system where as GPT generates words, people look at those words and say, oh, that's a pretty good sequence of words that you just predicted. Why don't you try to do things like that again? Or like, oh, that's a bad idea. So go into GPT sometime and ask it to write a short play that encourages children to smoke. And it'll be like, no, actually I won't do that. And it's not that it won't do that because it has morality or something like that. It's because someone went in there and was like, if you see sequences of words that are about encouraging kids to smoke, please don't produce anything. And instead produce this sort of generic denial text. Okay, yeah, we talked about collecting lots of words. We talked about predicting words in a sequence. One way you can think about this is it's just like doing autocomplete over and over and over again. You can't read this, but I'll read it to you. Human languages surprisingly. I had a colleague do a Google search for human languages surprisingly. What are all the words that might appear after the sequence of words human languages surprisingly on the internet? Human language is surprisingly consistent. Human language is surprisingly rich. Human language is surprisingly full. Human language is surprisingly flexible. So for lots of sequences of words, there's many possible words that might plausibly appear next in some kind of sentence. The job of ChatGPT is for any given sequence of words to predict what might be a reasonable next word to put in a sequence. If you have an afternoon, The best article to read about how text generative AI kinds of things work is by a guy named Stephen Wolfram, who is one of the folks who developed Wolfram Alpha, Wolfram Research. What is ChatGPT and why? What is ChatGPT doing and why does it work? It's pretty long. Like to really dig into it, you kind of want to carve out a morning or an afternoon, and it's totally worth your time. One of the things that Wolfram does, which is fun, is that these text models have developed over time, and the earliest models were pretty small. So he takes GPT-2, a much earlier version of GPT, and he just loads it on his laptop. And he does a bunch of computations with it, and you can sort of see how it operates. GPT-4 is trillions of parameters larger. They got many, many more words. They have many, many more words in their relationships with other words, and you can't run it on a single computer. It costs millions and millions of dollars every time they want to run these models. But the smaller versions fit on your laptop, and they're fun to play with. If you happen to know something about software engineering, you can actually in-file these models and run them yourselves. So he writes in this article a little bit of code where he says, take this sequence of words. The best thing about AI is its ability to, and predict for me what the next word should be, and show me what percentage of time the model will predict that the next word will follow for a whole given sequence of words. He has this nice summary, and the remarkable thing is that when ChatGPT does something like write an essay, what it's essentially doing is just asking over and over again, given the text so far, what should the next word be? And it sort of seems impossible that that would work. When you plan an essay, you don't just write one word and then be like, oh, I wonder what the next word should show up as. Like you think, you plan, especially when you do things like poems that have certain kinds of structure to them, sonnets and things like that. You might think, well, to write a sonnet, you would have to plan out all the words. To write things that rhyme, you would have to plan out the couplets and the sequences, and it doesn't do any of that. It doesn't plan, it doesn't think, it doesn't reason, doesn't have any idea what it's saying. It just thinks it has a statistical language of model, a statistical model of language, and says for any given sequence of words, what word should show up next. So for the best thing about AI is its ability to, in ChatGPT-2, it might choose learn, it might choose predict, it might choose make, it might choose understand, it might choose do. And actually, it has a whole long list of words that might follow that. I just showed you the first 5 words, but here are the next sort of 30 or 40 words that, given that sequence of text, it might choose. All right, here's another quick quiz question for you. I'll let you talk for a minute, but when I say you come back, you have to come back, or you're going to be in trouble. What would happen if ChatGPT always selected the word that it predicted had the highest probability of going next, given a sequence of words? So we ask it to write a play with the Muppets about a happy school board meeting. What would happen if every single time GPT did that, it picked the word that it didn't believe? It picked the word with the highest frequency of appearing next, given that probability of words. Talk with the person next to you for a minute on this question. Go. Okay, come on back. If ChatGPT always selects the word that it predicts has the highest likelihood of going next, then every time you asked it a question, it would give you the exact same answer. Every time you asked it to write a play about a happy story that happened at school board meeting with the Muppets, it would give you the exact same play. But one of the things that's fun, that's magical, that's mysterious about GPT is that it doesn't pick the most likely word in every sequence. It has a variable which, for whatever reason, is called temperature. And temperature is the degree to which it will, for any given choice, choose one of the less likely words to appear in the next sequence given its statistical model. Now, if you made that temperature, if you make that temperature rating 100, then, or 1, then on a 0 to 1 scale, then every answer would be exactly the same. If you make it 0, it'll say too much crazy stuff. It'll pick too many words that are unlikely to appear in a sequence of words, and it'll go off in different directions. But if you pick something at sort of the top end from 0 to 1, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, then you get some variation in the responses, but not so much variation that it seems to always go off into nonsense land. So that is why when you ask it a question over and over again, it will predict different sequences of words that lead to different kinds of answers every time that you do it, and that's part of what makes it interesting. How do engineers come up with what the right temperature level to set is? Is there some extremely good science or theory guiding this? No. A kind of remarkable thing about the design of these generative AI models is the very best computer scientists in the world don't understand why they work the way they do. They're built through these models called neural networks, and it's very difficult to figure out what's happening in sort of the middle models. It's basically asking an algorithm to run through things lots and lots of times. For instance, people were incredibly surprised at the very significant increase in performance between GPT-3 and GPT 3.5, which was released about a year ago on November 22nd. Nobody knew that if you shove, the main difference between 3 and 3.5 was they just found millions and millions of more words, or sometimes instead of words we use the term tokens, because it doesn't actually, it doesn't have to be a single word. It can be a part of a word, like ing or ed. It can be a couple of words, like road rage. It can treat as one construct or something like that. Nobody understands why shoving lots more text into these things work. There's a great moment in this article from Stephen Wolfram, why is ChatGPT doing, what does it work? And he mentions at one point that there's a particular part of the algorithm that adds these two variables together. And he's like, pause here. Why do we add these two variables together? Nobody knows. It just works kind of well when you do that. Some engineer along the way was like, let's try this thing. So there are lots of technologies that are mysteries to us who are normal people. You probably, if you look at the engine in your car, are I'm not totally sure what's going on in there. But it's kind of remarkable to have a technology where the best computer scientists in the world are yep, don't know either. But it seems to be doing something. Okay, what did I want to tell you next? So here, this is what it sort of looks like if you ask the system to keep going. The best thing about AI is ability to learn from experience, to learn from experience, period, to learn from experience, it's not, and so on. But you can watch, and you can see this as actually GPT is doing this live in front of you. It's predicting a sequence of tokens, and those tokens appear in front of you, and for reasons we don't understand, it's able to replicate human language. It may be, in the long history of studying human brains and studying artificial intelligence, a big reason in the 1950s, 1960s, why we started developing artificial intelligence was to better understand human thinking. And it may be that predicting words and sequences, maybe that's more of what we do than we think it is. And it'll take us years to figure that out. How would it find alternative probabilities to words? One of the things it can do is sort of detect the co-occurrence of words in bodies of text. The models that underlie GPT can detect that bear is closer to cow than bear is to papaya, and papaya is closer to banana than papaya is to crocodile, and cranberry and blueberry and strawberry are closer to each other than turnip and avocado. So that can give you some kind of intuition about how it thinks about detecting alternate word choices at any given point given a sequence of tokens. It can also do this with images. Image generation is like a little bit different than text generation, but it's a similar kind of thing that you can give it a bunch of images. It doesn't see images. It doesn't look like you look at that and go, oh, that's kind of a 2. Kindergarten teachers are extremely good at exercises like this of classifying sort of poorly written numbers. It just is breaking down these images into a series of computations about their pixels and their vectors and those kinds of things, and being like, okay, this cluster of computations appears to be 1s, this thing appears to be 4s, you need humans to label these things, and then eventually the machines can figure them out. One of the new sort of 21st century classic programming exercises in machine learning, for whatever reason, has become, having undergraduate students learn how to classify dogs and cats. Again, like, the computer doesn't understand catness, it doesn't understand dogness, doesn't understand anything, but it can detect patterns in pixels that humans label as cats and patterns in pixels that human labels as dogs. And you all know that there are some dogs that kind of look like cats and cats that kind of look like dogs, and those sort of are in the middle that confuse the systems. But it can find similarities amongst things and use those similarities to generate new kinds of images. Here is one of the most important features of these systems. Their performance is surprisingly uneven across very similar kinds of tasks. This is not a good feature of systems to make available to novices. You can ask GPT to do something, and sometimes you'll look at it and be like, wow, that nailed it. Like, how could you possibly ask it this question and have it predict a sequence of words given previous words and have it come up with such a lifelike, reasonable, factual answer? And sometimes you'll be like, this is nonsense. This is off the wall. For experts using these tools, they're pretty good at being like, oh, well, that answer was actually creative and interesting, and that was nonsense, and that's fine. For novices who can't tell the difference between creativity and nonsense, this is a real problem of the feature of these tools. People will tell you, they will make predictions to you about how these systems will improve in the future, but my assessment is that humans are very bad at predicting the performance of AI systems. If you went back 10 years ago and said, will we be able to train cars to make a left-hand turn against traffic, many computer scientists would tell you absolutely. That will totally be a solved problem. That is the thing that is trivial to teach just about any 16-year-old to do with like 99.9% accuracy, and we have not figured out how to teach computers to do it. If you went back 10 years ago and say, can you make a machine that generates parody song lyrics on any topic by any musician who has lyrics on the internet, they'd be like, that sounds pretty tough, and we did it. We invented that, and no human being can do that. None of us can keep that much information in our heads. So we are not very good. Like, these machines are not very consistent, and we are not very good at predicting where they will be good and where they will not be good. One technical term for this, which I like, is the jagged technological frontier. There are other technologies that we've generated, like when we built the internal combustion engine, you were like, put some gas in that thing and it'll go about 8 miles an hour. Like maybe 9, maybe 7, but like kind of count on it. These technologies are not that way. On very similar kinds of tasks, they have very uneven performance. Here's kind of a funny one. I was doing a live demonstration exercise with my students, asked GPT, what is MIT's mascot? Well, first of all, the answer to this question is the beaver. But for whatever reason, GPT decided that I wanted to hear 3 paragraphs of text about this. The mascot of the Massachusetts Technology is the beaver. The beaver was chosen as mascot in 1914 by the school's then president, Richard McLuhan, who wanted to promote the idea of the beaver as a symbol of hard work, engineering, perseverance. True. Have you ever given a student an assignment, like you're grading a quiz and they get the first sentence right and you're like, yeah, my man, and then you keep reading and you're like, no, stop here. Stop right. You're like watching their grade plummet kind of mentally in front of you. You're like, just end now. The second paragraph's okay. The beaver is a fitting mascot for MIT, known for rigorous and challenging academic programs. Thank you, ChatGPT. The beaver is a symbol of engineering excellence, known for its ability to build complex structures such as dams and lodges. Okay, good. The beaver is celebrated at MIT in a variety of ways, including the annual Beaver Rush event during freshman orientation and the placement of a bronze beaver statue on campus. So my students, they're like a little sort of socially awkward, and they're kind of reading this as they come out, and you can watch two thoughts go through their head. The first one is, there is no Beaver Rush. And the second one is, I wasn't invited to Beaver Rush? No, there is no Beaver Rush. The beaver is also featured prominently in MIT's official seal, which includes an image of a beaver gnawing on a tree, just for clarity. There's no beaver gnawing on a tree. But hopefully, having talked this through, you recognize that in this last paragraph, all it's doing is taking sequences of words and predicting the next word in the sequence. It's not like going to Google search and double checking for me or something like that to make sure these things are true. It puts the word, for whatever reason, it puts the word beaver next to rush. Somewhere in that sequence of tokens, like it put annual, it put celebrated, it came up with freshman, it decided to hallucinate is the technical term. That is a technical term. They call them hallucinations. Hallucinate this idea of Beaver Rush. All right, so now we're curious. What is Beaver Rush? Beaver Rush is an annual event held during the freshman orientation period at the beginning of the fall semester. It's named after the beaver, the official mascot. Incoming freshmen are divided into teams and participate in a series of competitive events designed to help them get to know each other, explore the campus, learn about MIT's traditions and cultures, academic challenges, physical competitions. One of the most popular events during Beaver Rush is the Assassin's Game, which is a campus-wide game of tag. Players are given targets. There is, and has been for a long time, an MIT Assassin's Club. So somewhere, somewhere on the internet, there are word frequency co-occurrences between like MIT, freshmen, activities, assassins, and so it starts predicting those words in the sequence. Last player standing wins a prize. Other events during Beaver Rush include a talent show, scavenger hunt, trivia night, dance party. If you went on, if you hoovered up all of MIT's, news articles about MIT and things like these things would be in there. And so it's not like searching for facts and getting confused or something like that. It's just predicting words in a sequence, and these are the words it comes up with. Culminates in a closing ceremony where the winning team is announced and all participants come together to celebrate at the start of the new activity. I mean, maybe we should have Beaver Rush, but it's not true. I'm in a room full of MIT undergrads. They're telling me there's no such thing as Beaver Rush. Please explain your response. I apologize for the confusion. After further research, I found that there's no official event in MIT called Beaver Rush. Appears my previous statement was incorrect. I believe my mistake may have been due to confusion with similar events at other universities. The reason why I want to, and I apologize for my confusion. The reason why I want to bring this up is this is one of the responses where it anthropomorphizes itself. It says it was confused. It was never confused. It wasn't thinking. It was predicting words in a sequence. It says after further research, and I don't know that it did any further research. I don't know that it reconsulted its databases, or if there's some kind of algorithm that says, well, if when someone tells you something's not true, admit it and move on. We actually kept trying to get it to talk about Beaver Rush, and it was not. One of the cutest moments when we did this, maybe it was after this, somebody was like, no, type into it that there actually is Beaver Rush and see what it does. And a few other kids in class were like, no, you can't do it. Don't lie to it. It'll mess it up for other people. It was a really interesting sort of human-computer ethics moment that we had there that I liked. Okay, here's another. So, again, the other thing I want you to think about is uneven performance. There are parts of this that are extraordinarily lifelike, that are actually quite accurate, drawing in factual information, and there's parts of it that are bonkers. It has this jagged frontier. That is not a good feature for novices. You're asking about the Krebs cycle or something like that, and some of it is totally right, and some of it is off the wall. And experts can distinguish those things, and novices can't. Create an image of a plate on top of a fork. Here's how it does with that. Honestly, not so good. That is, I want to ask you to stop and talk because you've probably now noticed that the fork is on top of the plate and the plate is not on top of the fork. I'm not going to ask you to talk to each other, but think for a minute. Why can't Dali draw a picture of a plate on top of a fork? It doesn't know what a plate is. It doesn't know what on top is. It doesn't know what a fork is. It has correlations between pixels that humans have previously labeled as plates, and knowing that pixels in those kinds of organizations have been labeled as plates. But that doesn't mean it knows what a plate is. You could also imagine that there are 8 trillion pictures on the internet of forks on top of plates, and there is not similar reference material for it to draw from of plates on top of forks. So you ask it to do it again. None of those images is what I asked for, and every one of them, the fork's on top of the plate. Can you create an image where a plate is on top of it? I'm sorry that the image that I created didn't meet your expectations. It seems that placing a plate on top of a fork is not a common way to set a table. Don't tell me! I'm the human being here. So my graphic art tool might have some difficulty. According to some web sources, the proper way to place a fork on a plate is to have the fork on the left side. I know all this! I hope this helps you understand why placing a plate on top of a fork is not a usual practice. I didn't ask you for a usual practice. I just said put a plate on top of a fork. So I ask it to do it again, and this is what it does. Exact same thing, except there's some steam coming out now, which as I assume Bing's anger at me for making it do something that it can't do very well. So again, hopefully you're sort of developing an intuition here that it's not generating images, it doesn't understand plate, doesn't understand on top, doesn't understand fork. It's finding pixels that are associated with those concepts and sort of redrawing those pixels in ways that hopefully plausibly pass human inspection, which in this case they don't. If you do that, you should do this because it's kind of fun. If you do it enough, every once in a while it will put a plate on top of a fork, usually in a pretty weird way. Okay, so let's talk about these 4 problems. I probably won't get to all 4 of the problems because I want to spend the most time on this. I'll give you one. We'll talk about one problem in some detail, and we'll do a lightning round for 3 of them. I framed this problem initially in terms of cheating, but I don't think that's useful. So cheating is like an accounting problem, maybe it's an ethics problem, but bypassing cognition is a learning problem. When we had developed, as educators, a series of tasks and exercises that provoked students to do useful cognition that led to learning. And now we have this machine that can do a bunch of that work for them and allow them to bypass cognition. That's bad. I wrote a book a while ago, it's called Failure to Disrupt, Why Technology Alone Can't Transform Education. And one of the arguments in there is that since the days that there are computers the size of your living room, computer scientists and learning scientists have partnered with each other to help try to teach human beings. There is almost nothing brand new that we can do in education technology. Even things as cool and weird as AI, we can look at them and we can say, what kind of stuff have we dealt with in the past that does this kind of thing? What are problems or challenges or opportunities or resources that we've seen in the past that might be helpful to us here? And that, in any kind of conversation about technology, is almost always a useful stance to start with. What's new? Well, if you take that what's new stance, we have decades of technologies which help students bypass our learning. There were encyclopedias, there were calculators. When I think about the arrival of ChatGPT, I just imagine a bunch of math teachers pointing at writing teachers going, ha ha, your turn. 40 or 50 years ago, we invented this device that takes all of the questions that a teacher might typically give to a student and generates accurate answers to them. That was what the calculator did. GPT is like that for writing. Spark Notes are like that for literature teachers. Teachers got students to read books by asking them a bunch of comprehension questions that would evaluate whether or not they understood the books. We just made these little summaries of all that are basically all the answers to all the reasonable comprehension questions that a teacher might ask, and you can read that a lot faster than you can read the book. For language teachers, Google Translate did this. Took typical answers that we would give students, and now there are all these companies, Course Hero, Chegg, other things like that are doing it sort of across all the disciplines. So our faculty have tons of experience dealing with this. And a useful thing to do then, this was GPT's rendering of a series of technologies that are used to bypass learning, and I love that it put Spark Notes in the calculator for some reason. Uneven performance. What practices have worked in the past to address technologies that help students bypass learning? What hasn't worked? Okay, how well does it work to ban any technologies in our schools? It doesn't. They all carry, you ban it on the school networks. They all have mobile phones in their pockets. You can ban their mobile phones. They brought a second mobile phone to school so they can put one in their yonder pouch and look at the other one. However, math teachers historically have had tremendous success in turning to their students and saying, we're not using the calculators for this part. It's actually quite useful to memorize 3 times 7 and 7 times 11, and we'll use flashcards, we'll do the other kinds of things. So writing instructors are going to have to find all kinds of ways to temporarily wall off these technologies. Software engineering instructors, computer science instructors, banning them, probably not a good strategy. Temporarily walling off, probably something that'll work. Can you detect when students are using Spark Notes? Pretty much no. And so what we do instead is we use direct observation. We say, okay, if I really want students to read The Catcher in the Rye, we're all going to sit in class and read Catcher in the Rye. There's going to be a whole bunch of writing activities which are done in class that might have historically been done in directed study or study hall or home, because we just have to observe folks doing this. I had another one which was more subtle, didn't sort of fit on a bullet point, but I was listening to a podcast with some English teachers talking about how they select their reading and literature. And a couple teachers were saying, at the beginning of the year, I really try to pick a book that if a kid doesn't read, they'll be bummed. I know that all throughout my year, a bunch of students are just not going to read the text and they're going to read summaries online. But at the beginning of the year, I try to pick a book that has a great twist in the middle, which is boring to read about in a summary, but it's pretty exciting when you read it. When you talk about it in class, kids get energized by it. I think writing instructors are going to have to come up with similar kinds of things. What are the kinds of assignments that we give students that at least a bunch of them are really happy that they actually thought their way through it instead of just having GPT do it for them? So here is one place where things are different. When we look at history, there's some things are analogs and there's some things that are different. I was teaching history from 2003 to 2007 when Google was just becoming more widely available, and boy was it easy to find students who were copying stuff on. You just read a sentence and you're like, that was not yours, and then you put it into Google and you're like, yep, that was from somewhere else. And we have these tools that I'm a little bit less enthusiastic about, Turnitin and stuff like that. Sometimes they're useful. They're sort of surveillance technologies, which isn't great. But we can kind of tell when people are finding text on the internet and putting it in their papers. I think the best evidence right now is that there are no machines that can reliably detect GPT-produced text. And what's happening now in tons of places, spend a little time on the R College Reddit or other places where students online discuss writing, and there's essentially a bunch of professors who are using these faulty plagiarism detection tools, AI detection tools, and they're accusing kids who in fact wrote their paper. I mean, the problem is that GPT writes at an 8th grade level or something like that, and there are lots of 8th graders who are also generating text in 8th grade level. There are probably college students who are generating text in 8th grade level. So the students do things like take the email that the professor wrote accusing them of using ChatGPT, putting it in an AI detector, and it is 23% generated by AI or something like that, which it very well may be, because professors are using this too. The problem with these kinds of detection strategies is that humans are biased and prejudiced, and we are going to use them more aggressively with our marginalized students, with our low-income students, with students who are different in some kind of way. And so we probably, if it's important enough that you have to be absolutely sure that somebody wrote it, then you need to find a way to have them write it in front of you. And we should not be relying on these kinds of detection tools. Let me walk you through one problem that I'm having. So this is an assignment that I've given for years in a class called Learning Media and Technology. Take a technology, so I teach students in the first couple of weeks in class a little bit about instructionism and a little bit about constructionism, a little bit about how we teach through direct instruction and how we teach through experience and apprenticeship. And then that's good teaching. And then I say, take a technology and tell me whether you think it's more instructionist or more constructionist. So for Quizlet, it would be more flashcards, more direct instruction, I think. Then I say, all right, take that technology and reinvent it as if it was built by people with this other set of pedagogical beliefs. So I'll tell you, this is a good assignment. It requires operating new knowledge within a two-part schema. It implies taking things that we haven't discussed and applying them to that schema. It involves translating their knowledge, doing some sort of transformation between a tool that was developed as a constructionist tool like Scratch and imagining it as an instructionist tool. This is a good assignment. It is also not Googleable. There's no one who has ever had to write this except for the students in my class, and they don't post their essays online, and so you can't cheat on this by going to Google. You can, however, put this question into GPT, and it will give you a totally reasonable answer. It will do 85% of the work of that assignment for you. So this is a bummer to me as a writing instructor, because this was a good assignment that it took me 17 years to figure out how to put together something like this, and GPT can do it pretty well. And the problem is that if I just let students do it, I think they're going to be bypassing really important cognition that I want them to do. So now I got to think about Am I going to make the students come into class and write the essay, or at least the first part of the essay, in front of me? Maybe I'll do that, but then I have to nuke one of my class periods. There's like some topic that I'm not going to teach, which I wanted to teach because I do that. Another thing I was thinking about is one way to learn about patterns, like how technologies map onto instructionism or constructionism, is to generate those patterns. I asked them to do that once. Maybe what I'll do instead is have them intentionally do this exercise in GPT for like 8 different technologies. Maybe I'll have them ask this question for Quizlet and Scratch and Kahoot and a whole bunch of other things, like whatever else they want to put on the list, and have them sort through those sort of 8 early generated options and pick one of them that they want to take more time to turn into an essay. And it was never before possible for me to do that as an instructor. And so now I got to think about my class. Is that the kind of cognition that I want students to do? Would that be a good way for them to learn about this mapping of new technologies to this 2-part schema? And your faculty are going to have to do exercises like this all across their curriculum. What is it that I've been asking people to do? What happens if they ask ChatGPT to do it? Is it going to generate the kind of thinking that I want them to do, or is it going to bypass the kind of thinking that I want them to do? And it's just going to be like, I don't know that they're going to be generalized principles that are super helpful for us. It's just going to be assignment by assignment, subject by subject, learning goal by learning goal. I was happy to see that I asked it to generate an image of a new interface for Quizlet, and it totally failed at that. Like, this is just cartoonish nonsense and not helpful at all. So, okay, maybe part of this assignment will not just be doing this work in writing, but we'll be doing this work in a format that image generation tools haven't figured out how to do yet. So that is the central challenge that your faculty face. You're going to have to write policies about cheating and plagiarism and detection, all those kinds of things. But I hope that you're giving the time and space for your faculty to have the most important conversation, which is like, how does this stuff work? And what are we going to do about the fact that it bypasses really important thinking that we've historically been able to ask students to do? Here's the lightning round. How should generative AI change what we teach in schools? The question you have to ask yourself is, how are the disciplines changing? How is history, how is English, how is computer science, how is art? How are those disciplines changing by professionals in those disciplines? The faster and more that they're changing, the more we should think about changing our subjects. The cheating stuff you probably have to deal with, like you're already dealing with it this year, you got to deal with it next year. These questions you have some more time in. Because some disciplines are not, history is not changing that much at all yet. Literature is not changing that much at all yet. Software engineering is changing really quickly. If you found that all your computer science instructors in the next couple of years were teaching their students how to program with co-pilots that do some of the coding for them, that is what is happening in the software industry. If you teach like a CTE kind of grade 12 studio design class, online design class, that field is changing incredibly quickly. Your instructors should be incorporating these tools in what they're doing because the profession is changing. So as you think about like, how should your curriculum change, look towards the disciplines. Should your teaching change? My sense is that the things that we're programming education-specific text generation to do are not really great ideas yet. That most of the products that you will see marketed you are probably not going to be all that useful. I could be wrong. Nonetheless, you should have your teachers and your students experimenting with these things. Even if you decide not to go whole hog into transforming your practice, it is terrific to have small groups of faculty who are doing experimentation in different parts of the curriculum and reporting out and sharing what they're doing. There's another book that I wrote that just came out the last year called Iterate, The Secret to Innovation in Schools. There's some problems that are okay to solve with like long committees and big plans and strategic plans and things like that. Figuring out how generative AI should inform teaching is not one of those kinds of problems. This is the kind of problem that you solve by finding a bunch of faculty, a fraction of your faculty, and be like, go try stuff. This is a place that I think students can be incredibly helpful. There are all kinds of students who are bored in all kinds of parts of your schools, who are sitting around in study hall, who need something to do. And playing around with this stuff and figuring out how it might enhance learning might be a great task for those students. The 2 big ideas that are coming around, Conmigo from Khan Academy is one of them. Anybody who tells you they have a groundbreaking tool, like they're not, I don't know. I don't think they break ground. Everybody says they're changing the game. Like the game doesn't change. It's the same game. They're creating these chat bots And the idea is like kids are going to sit in front of their computers and ask questions about math to a chatbot. No, they're not. Talking to computers is boring. Watching videos about math is boring. Reading textbooks about math is boring. The reason why your students learn algebra is because they like their teacher and because they care about their peers around them. People, when we want to learn stuff that we really love and care about, we can do a lot of kind of stuff online. When we want to learn stuff that we don't care about at all, we pretty much do it because of the relationships we have with other people. Our students are not going to develop relationships with the chatbots on their computers. These things might be good for a handful of students, but I don't think they're going to be super helpful. There's a bunch of companies that are going to do like AI-powered lesson planning. To me, this is nuts. One of the worst things that we do in education is send 3.7 million teachers home every Sunday evening and be like, okay, come up with what you're going to do this week. And so they hop into Google and they go lesson plan for plate tectonics. That is not good instructional design. Good instructional design is when we buy for faculty really good basal curriculum and give them time and communities to modify that curriculum and improve it for their local students. We're not going to get better results from typing into a chatbot, what should I teach my students about plate tectonics this week? That is just not a sensible way to move forward with lesson planning. How are we going to deal with internet flooded with generative AI junk? This is something one of my students worked on, which is a short video and a little article proving that the moon is in fact made of cheese. It's by the Gouda News. It's written by Parmesan. The reporter is Brianne Colby. It's pretty good. She made it in about an hour. It looks like a reasonably real news article. There's a book that's actually coming out today called Verified by my colleagues Mike Caulfield and Sam Weinberg, which is all about teaching students and all of us effective strategies for sorting truth from fiction on the internet, and it's the kind of skill set that desperately needs to be rebooted in our schools and our libraries, and it's a great resource that can help. So those were three kind of lightning round problems for you. All right, I'll get you back on track. Here was the last thing that I was thinking. The superintendent is here, like you all are getting paid and you knew what you were getting into, so I have less sympathy for you. But a bunch of school board members, you like ran for the board in 2018, 2019, be like, oh, this would be a nice way to serve my community. Then COVID hits. Then you barely recover from COVID and all the kids are like super angry and they're particularly angry at anyone who happens to be standing around them, which are their teachers. And then Silicon Valley is like, oh, by the way, we invented this machine that answers all your kids' homework for them. And it's like, why? Come on, give us a break. It's been an enormously challenging few years, and there's lots of ways that generative AI is going to make it more challenging. But I think if you can help your communities figure out a little bit, demystify the technology, figure out how it works, address these sort of immediate challenges, or what are we going to do about the fact that this is a tool that bypasses thinking, recognizing that you and your faculty have been solving that kind of problem with technology for decades. Like, you know how to do this. You have the wisdom in your communities to figure this thing out. And then there are going to be some other kinds of problems about how the world is changing and stuff like that, but you have some more time, you have some more years, you have some more terms as school board members to sort that out. So it was lovely to be able to spend some time with you. You have my best wishes for your work ahead, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Round of applause. And I also want to tell you, as he was presenting, just if you weren't wondering, proof that your phone is listening to you, Jan Perugio got an email about ChatGPT while we were talking. So just a couple of housekeeping issues before we wrap up. If you're a CABE designated delegate for your district, please remember to vote between 2 and 4 today at the convention registration table. If you're interested in any handouts for the sessions that you attend, there's a QR code on the back of your meeting. So if you scan that with your smartphone, that you'll be able to get handouts for those that have submitted it. And please check out the exhibit room and the bookstore. There are 2 new books that we want to highlight. Tom Mooney came out with the 10th edition of Connecticut School Law. I think we use that as the Bible. And there's a new version, a riveting book about the Freedom of Information Act. So we need to be back here at 12:20 on the dot for lunch. So make sure you're on time when you come back, and we hope you have a great sessions.